If you're going to try and run a successful revolution, there are a few archetypes that should be followed. Ho Chi Minh, inspiring his people through unwavering charisma. Mao, leading his small red army in the Chinese foothills to victory. Castro, commanding guerrilla forces against the overwhelming power of the US government. These are all shining examples of how to run a successful revolution. The Mad Summer is how not to. If you're going to attempt to rile a population to support your revolutionary ideas, you better make damn sure that they support your position. In 1874, a horde of Russian students entered the countryside, attempting to drum up support for their revolutionary positions. For those of you who are not Russian, or have no knowledge of Russian history, this is not the same as that revolution that would come to create the USSR. This is one of the starting points that is just too hilarious to overlook. The methods employed by these revolutionaries were so well thought out and just brilliant that it led to the arrest of 193 of them. So what kind of tactics did this group employ?
Bombs?
No.
Covert attacks?
No.
Infiltration?
No.
Dirty rags as a disguise?
By gum, Billy! You're right! Yes, these highly educated, future leaders of Russia thought that they could incite an empire-wide revolution against the tyranny of the Tsar and his government with rags and slogans. How big was the Russian military at the time? Approximately 900,000 regulars and 250,000 Cossacks? This was going to be a success right out of the gate. The whole plan was to spread radical ideas and language throughout the peasant communes. The problem with this plan is that the two groups basically didn't speak the same language. Now, they both spoke Russian, sure, but have you ever tried to talk to a drunk farmer after he's been on his farm all day? It sounds like he has marbles in his throat. Now, to make things worse, you speak with such an elevated vocabulary that half of what you say might as well be Chinese to him. Dmitri, I like you, but I don't understand you. Come to fist fight. You sound like Babushka. The next major roadblock is that these communities were very distrustful of strangers, and even more distrustful of those who resemble their old masters under serfdom, which was really only one rung above slavery. In walks a man who speaks unlike anything you've ever heard, talking about things you don't understand no matter how hard you try, and the things that make sense to you are only about how great your squalid hellhole of a community is. To make an attempt to blend in, the students shed their clean clothing in favor of dirty rags similar to what the peasants wore. You might be thinking they look the part, but the clothes do not make the man. If your hands are clean or you don't know how to till earth, you won't blend in very long. So they spread all over, teaching and educating. Attempting to, at least. Teaching a group of peasants who really wanted no part of this revolutionary thinking anyway. For many of these peasants, it was dangerous to be associated with anything that went against the Tsar, and they would have none of it. Quite a few students were beaten, kicked out of villages, or my personal favorite was the one who was beaten, locked in a woodshed for days while one farmer walked to get the local constable. One interesting group that had to create elaborate backstories were the women. You can explain away a man who can read and write, but a woman? That's more difficult. So they would say that they were former household servants who were taught to read as a parlor trick. So let's break down the reasons as to why the Mad Summer failed. 1. Size and proximity of the Russian military. 2. A common mistrust. 3. These two groups couldn't communicate properly. 4. These jackasses can't take a punch. 5. A fear of the government and a common love of the Tsar. And 6, finally, most importantly, women shouldn't read. Due to all these unforeseen circumstances, the peasants turned on the students and called for the authorities. They were promptly arrested. Then followed the trials, the totally fair, not one-sided or influenced by the government in any way. The trials are what we can describe as a show trial, an event which the accused is railroaded in a very public space that was well publicized. The entire country was reading about what these students did in their attempts to radicalize the farmers. Now, what the government did was also give them a platform for which to spread their message. If an accused person was allowed to speak with no limitations at their trial, You bet they were going to sing like canaries. So the accused stood in the courtroom, spouting their revolutionary ideas, hoping someone, somewhere, will read it in the Sunday paper. Now, the crazy thing is, and you might think I'm crazy, but it worked. Let's look at this from an optimistic standpoint. You know what? Let's add a number 7 that says, get arrested. Because that's the only thing these aspiring radicals did right. By getting arrested, they drew the attention of the government and the people, bringing down the bureaucratic might of the Russian Tsar. By being arrested, these would be the beginners of change and reform, actually furthering their goals. So, where are they now? Dead. Everyone involved in this story is dead. But, where did they end up? Now that's a good question. 153 of them were imprisoned in camps in Siberia, where they served out harsh sentences. Now, the conditions and outcomes of these sentences actually led to the hardening of attitudes towards the government. No longer would revolutionaries vie for gradual social change through peaceful means. They quickly became violent aggressors that agitated for said change. And we all know how that turned out. The Mad Summer is one of the events that led to the changing of sentiments for nonviolent means of social reform. So when I called these revolutionaries failures for not achieving their goals with the peasants, I was totally correct. But they did play the long game well. It's a shame no one told them that.